All right then, now President Bola Tinubu's economic team has demonstrated some talent and vision in pursuing its economic model, virtually dictated by the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, which have also backed him up with critical loans. Now, the uncompromising implementation of the removal of fuel subsidy, floating of the naira, and partial removal of subsidy on electricity and aggressive tax reforms appear to be working. Now, the economic system especially the naira forex balance, is stabilizing. Inflation, especially food, is cooling through, though still very prohibitive. The number, as peddled by government, look good, but with very little effect on where it matters. That's talking about the people. President Bola Tinubu has, of course, according to reports, done remarkably well in the petroleum sector, despite residual murmurings over alleged conflicts of interest. Nigeria has recovered almost full domestic refining capacity. As oil theft has reduced, investment is returning, and despite the fall in crude oil price, Nigerians export more crude. However, experts say more needs to be done to bring more private refineries on stream and drive down the cost of fuels. Well, our guest is Dr. Ayo Teriba. He is the Chief Executive Officer, Economic Associates. He joins us via Zoom to kickstart this week's conversation. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining the program.
Good afternoon, Tolu.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it's good to start with a general overview. I know we've had you speak around this before now, but these reforms of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu-led government, your assessment at the moment, 2 years after, of the implementation and, of course, impact on the economy after 24 months.
Thank you very much. Well, it's a pleasure to observe that President Tinubu and his team arrived at the halfway mark stronger in their economic reform and outcomes than they had been at any point previously, since they started 24 months ago. Because of, if you look at from January 2025 to date, we have received news of a turnaround in the economic variables. Most of 2024, we got depressing news of things getting worse, month after worse. But thanks to God, since January, we've been receiving news, of things getting better month after month. Whether you are talking about the stability of the exchange rate, or you are talking about inflation, or you are talking about net foreign exchange reserves, or you are talking about GDP growth. One has to, congratulate the regime and rejoice with the generality of Nigerians about the improvement, the much awaited improvement here with us now. And we can only hope that they are sustained. Much of the encouraging, apart from the fact that the news about improved net reserves arrived in the first quarter of this year, some of us had been saying that weak reserves was the bane of the weak exchange rate that we had experienced from 2023 through the end of 2024. Now, I'm happy that in the second anniversary speech, the president was able to refer to an improvement, a fivefold. He said fourfold, but it's actually fivefold improvement in net reserves between the time they took over and now. And that is what will underpin a stable exchange rate going forward. If they can do more of that, make sure that net reserves keep strengthening, then exchange rate will not just be stable, but will actually record market improvement and travel in the opposite direction from which it has traveled in the last 2 years. Then on the, we will have more to say. I mean, this is just an initial overview. Then it's not on the exchange rate or the reserves that news arriving lately shows that we are in a much better place by the halftime. The restructuring of the board of the NNPC also, reassures the country that the much expected quantity response from government-owned refineries may now be forthcoming. We've been frustrated in that regard by the opaque regime of the previous board of the NNPC. We were calling on the president, just like we were saying, work on reserves at the time. We were calling on the president to restructure the board of the NNPC. And well, thankfully, on the eve of the halftime, it has done so. We can only hope that the pump prices would benefit from increased competition, and give Nigerians, better living standards. That's in a nutshell. I mean, if you have more questions, we can take.
Indeed, Dr. Teriba. The fallout of these policies has been the bone of contention, if you agree with me, as reactions have continued to trail the impact, particularly on the most vulnerable ones. Now, I think my question to you specifically now would be, what are the options for government at this very critical time to address the micro part of this?
Well, the first important thing that government should do, is to stay the course, particularly ensuring, that reserves continue to complement the strong reserve position. The reserve position keep being strengthened to complement the unified exchange rate position and the transparency in the market. They are being vindicated about the reforms, about all the effort made by the central bank. Now that we've seen stability, and now that they can come out and report, they're not reporting 42 billion in gross reserves. They are reporting nearly 24 billion in net reserves, from just less than 4 billion in 2023. And so, I mean, it remains to be seen how soon we can be reporting 30 billion, 40, 50 billion in net reserves. And you can imagine what's going to happen to the exchange rate. It's going to be more stable. And that's what will benefit the generality of Nigerians. What has inflicted hardship on the generality of Nigerians is the depreciation in the value of the exchange rate. And that the primary benefit that government can do, for them is for us to see some degree of appreciation that benefits everybody instantly, across all social strata. So that's why I say government should stay the course. The same, with the sectoral reforms of energy, be it fuel prices, petroleum products, or power, or gas. What you do to boost supply, what you do to keep supply flowing, what you do to ensure that suppliers compete with themselves is what is going to give lower prices to the generality of the populace, not the palliatives. I mean, the government, yes, while the hardship lasted, had been, big on palliatives, for different categories but that's not what we should be aiming for in the medium to the long term. We should be aiming for improved economic fundamentals, stronger exchange rate that will make for lower inflation, that will make for stable prices, and better, production, better output of energy, be it power, be it, we are talking about transmission bottlenecks, be it gas, be it petroleum products, that more be produced, enough be produced so that competitors, producers will compete among themselves to reduce prices, as we've seen in telecoms, when we got to the stage where there was adequate competition in telecoms. Is my view.
Interesting. We've seen, you alluded to that in your first response, talking about the impressive figures from the central bank and, of course, stability of our exchange rate. At least we're not talking more about that disparity, that very large disparity we used to have. But in your thoughts, I'm going to ask you really, how sustainable is all of these moves going forward? And what do you make of that handshake between the Ministry of Finance and, of course, the Central Bank of Nigeria? Do you see that proper handshake that is taking us to where we will get to the point of inclusive growth moving forward?
Okay, let me speak about another area in addressing this issue you just brought up. Another area where President Bola Tinubu and his team have been, big, very ambitious, have been pushing, apart from the macroeconomic end in which we have successfully reformed the foreign exchange market, and we are now seeing stability, and we are hoping for improvement, or in the energy, segment, be it PMS, electricity or gas, even telecoms for that matter. Government had done things to prices in all those segments. And with the reform of the NNPC, there's hope now that they will do things to quantity, which will be what will sustain our hope of long-term improvements in prices. Ditto, for transmission and gas. But what the president has been saying and doing about what he calls his legacy projects, trying to link the nook and crannies of Nigeria with better highways, is crucially important. Trying to resolve energy infrastructure, through the, subsidy removal and reform of NNPC is crucial. But trying to resolve transport infrastructure is even more crucial. The two are related. Transport depends on energy. So his focus on connecting Nigeria will ultimately, if successful, see the competitiveness, improvement in the competitiveness of agriculture. Where, some say 50% of the harvest are lost after harvest, or in manufacturing, which are, or mining. Those real sectors are currently killed by uncompetitive transportation costs. So what President Tinubu is doing there is very crucial. We need to encourage him. As a matter of fact, we need to, encourage him to fast track what he's doing. I mean, the missing element in it, just like I kept saying that reserves was the missing element in the exchange rate reforms, and that NNPC reorganization was the missing element in subsidy reform. Is that the missing element in what the president is saying about superhighways is that we should be focusing more on rail than road. The benefit, the payoffs in terms of competitiveness and benefits, the economic opportunities, activity that rail can unlock, road will not even come anywhere close. And that the president should please not fund this through procurement. He shouldn't fund this from the meager fiscal resources that we have, but cut investors the way we cutted investors in moving from 500 telephone lines, 500,000 telephone lines to 200 million telephone lines. We are not going to be able to travel fast or travel far if we are depending on government financing or using debt financing. Encouraging the president to please consider replacing debt financing of those super highways, but I would say the super rail project, with equity financing, so that the fiscal position in which debt burden is already crippling us will not be compounded, and we won't see a return to ways and means, you can hope that with the improvements that we are seeing in the economy, if the fiscal situation is threatening, by relying on equity rather than on borrowing, that central bank will begin to ease It's a monetary policy levers, which right now are choking for businesses and households at more than 30% in MPR. If you add the corridor to the 27.5% MPR or the CRR of 50%. The main reason why central bank may continue to be hesitant in easing in spite of improvements in inflation and stability of exchange rate is the fiscal position. And talking about borrowing more at this time will only compound that situation, the nexus between fiscal and monetary. We shouldn't do more borrowing. We should do more equity issuance. We have very little or no equity issues existing in the market. So our headroom for equity issuance is huge, both at home and abroad. And I will encourage the president to consider connecting all those aspirations, which are noble, on connecting Nigeria with equity investors, both in transportation, rail and road, and in energy, for example, in power transmission, and in fiber optics, for digital, infrastructure, which are also very ambitious in laying across the country, will be my view. Tolu.
Right. Dr. Teriba, moving forward, it's no more news. We all know that the states and local governments are getting more revenue